We have discussed in the past that every sentence has a skeleton. It has a simple subject and it has a simple predicate. So here are a couple of examples. We have Cindy dances. Simple subject is Cindy. Simple predicate, dances. That's a complete sentence. Here's another one. John sprinted. The simple subject is John. The simple predicate is sprinted. Also a complete sentence. Now, many sentences also have additional words that help complete the sentence. Sometimes sentences that appear to have a simple subject and a simple predicate still aren't complete because something is missing, information's missing. For example, Susie is. This has a simple subject, Susie, and it has a verb, is, and it looks like it has the elements of a complete sentence, but you can see that it's definitely not complete. It needs something more. It needs a subjective complement in order to complete it, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, a subjective complement. A subjective complement completes the sentence skeleton by referring back to the subject of the sentence. Subjective complements are usually used after either a linking verb, like one of the forms of be, or a word that can be replaced by one of the forms of be. So an example of that is the verb tastes. We could use it in a sentence like this: sugar tastes sweet. Now we could take out the verb tastes and replace it with the form of the verb be, sugar is sweet. Because we can replace tastes with is, then we know that tastes is a linking verb and can have a subjective complement after it. So there are two kinds of subjective complements. There are predicate nominatives and predicate adjectives. We'll talk about predicate nominatives first. A predicate nominative is a noun or it's a pronoun that follows a linking verb and it renames the subject. So here we have an example. Virginia is a state in the United States of America. We see the subject, Virginia. We see the verb is. And I see that noun state. State renames Virginia. So state renames the subject. In another example, my neighbor is a policeman. The word policeman, that is in the predicate, and that renames the subject, neighbor. So here's a clue to help you determine if you're looking at a predicate nominative. It doesn't work in all situations, but in most of them it does. Let's look at the first sentence. Virginia is a state in the United States. Okay? Because the subject, Virginia, and the predicate nominative, state, they're both talking about the same person or thing. They're both talking about the same thing. You can usually flip them around and the meaning of the sentence remains the same. So Virginia is a state in the United States of America. So if I were to flip those two words and say a state in the United States of America is Virginia, that makes sense. If I were to flip that around a little bit and say a state in the United States of America is Virginia, that still makes sense. In the second sentence, my neighbor is a policeman. Well, if I flipped that around a little bit and I said a policeman is my neighbor, it means the same thing. It sounds a little bit awkward. We wouldn't normally say it like that, but it means the same thing. So these are predicate nominatives, a noun or a pronoun that follows a linking verb and it renames the subject. Okay, now we'll talk a little bit about predicate adjectives. Now, a predicate adjective is an adjective that modifies the subject. Here we have an example in this first sentence here. The defendant was guilty of burglary. The adjective guilty, that modifies the defendant, or that describes the word defendant. Because that describes defendant, that's a predicate adjective. In the second example, we have the soup tasted salty. Salty is an adjective again that modifies soup in the subject. In the third example, the weatherman appeared calm during the hurricane. Well, weatherman's the subject, and appeared is that verb, and calm is an adjective. And if we look, that adjective describes the weatherman. Calm describes the weatherman. That's a predicate adjective. Now, sometimes you have words following a linking verb that have another form altogether, another function in the sentence, and they're not complements. So just because you have words following a linking verb, don't automatically assume that those are complements. Before you decide something's a complement, you have to kind of examine it a little bit and determine if they really do modify the subject. That's the key. If it's a complement, it's going to modify that subject. Well, let's look at this first sentence. The lake water felt cool after their long hike. Okay, well, lake water is the subject and felt is a verb. Well, I can take out felt and substitute that with a be verb, let's say was. The lake water was cool. Cool lake water, that sounds reasonable. That makes sense. Cool describes the lake water and is a predicate adjective. So here we have the word felt again in the sentence. Mother felt the material to make sure it wasn't scratchy. Well, in this sentence, felt is describing an action. The word material follows felt, but material doesn't describe mother at all. So in this sentence, material has a completely different function. It's not an adjective here in this sentence, and so it's not a subjective complement. In this next sentence, we have Snoopy is a white dog. So Snoopy is the subject, is the verb. Is expressing being here in this sentence. And so I look at the noun dog and I can say, oh yeah, the dog is renaming Snoopy. Snoopy is a dog. So dog is a predicate nominative. In this last sentence, father is at work. Here we have the subject father, and we've got the word is again as the verb. Is expressing being. In this sentence, work doesn't modify father, and it doesn't rename father. So because it doesn't modify or rename father, it's not a subjective complement.